We're reading this morning from Isaiah 61, 1 through 4, and then 8 through 11. Hear the word of God. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me in to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and wrongdoing. In my faithfulness, I will reward my people and make an everlasting covenant with them. Their descendants will be known among the nations, and their offspring among the peoples. All who see them will acknowledge that they are a people of the Lord that he has blessed. I delight greatly in the Lord. My soul rejoices in my God, for he hath clothed me with garments of salvation and arrayed me in a robe of his righteousness. As a bridegroom adorns his head like a priest, and as a bride adorns herself with her jewels. For as the soil makes the sprout come up, and a garden causes seeds to grow, so the sovereign Lord will make righteousness and praise spring up before all nations. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
I have a Texas drawl. That's probably hardly news to you, but you know what? Nobody in Texas ever says that to me. When I leave the boundaries of the state, however, especially if I go up north, the further north I get, the more often I hear the comment, "You have a Texas drawl." Now, I don't know if you've ever traveled up north before, somewhere like New York or Chicago or somewhere like that. Those people talk really fast. Have you ever got into a restaurant and the waiter or waitress came to you and man, and I don't know about you, but I said, "Okay, can you go back and speak a little slower? Because I didn't get all that." And they'll say, "Oh, you're from Texas, aren't you?" If you have to go north and do business, you have got to really pay attention to what's being said in order to get everything. I lived in England for a year, and the English are fascinating because the English can hear one another's accents and pinpoint what county they're from. If you're a Londoner for a long time, they can frequently even pinpoint what part of London you're from. "Oh, you're from the Soho district. Oh, you're from York. You're from Bristol." And those of us from the United States who are listening to all this are going, "How can you tell the difference?" Now, it's also interesting because the reverse works. Because sometimes I would say, "Well, you know, I'm from Texas, but there are some people who are from New Jersey." And the British can't tell the difference with that. They would go, "What?" Turns out they were listening really hard to me all the time to get what it was I was saying. Now, I have a confession to make, and I'm sorry for her. Last week, Flor Granillo preached the 8:45 service and did a wonderful job. Flor Flora's first language is not English, and so she has an accent when she speaks in English. And when I started listening to her sermon, my first thought was, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to listen really carefully. I had to work really hard to listen to Flora's sermon. Now, I don't know about you, but there are two sides of my brain that argue with each other periodically. And so when that part of my brain said, gosh, I'm going to have to work really hard to get the sermon this week, the other half of my brain said, why aren't you working that hard every week at listening to the sermon? Why don't you pay really close attention every time you're listening to somebody preach? You know, sometimes we get in a rut. Oh, this is how it always happens. This is what it always sounds like. This is how the sermon always goes. And it could be that when that happens, we're not listening very carefully, and we may miss the voice of God speaking to us. I think the same thing is possible at Christmas time. Oh, we've always sung Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Actually, Hark the Herald Angels Sing is one of those funny songs. It was written by Charles Wesley. You know, John Wesley founded the Methodist Church, and his brother Charles wrote half our hymnal. But when Charles Wesley wrote Hark the Herald Angels Sing, it started out, Hark the Welcome Ring. And it turns out that even in the 1700s, nobody knew what the welcome was. And so George Whitfield, who was one of the early Methodist preachers, changed it to the Herald Angels, and everybody knew what it was then. Charles Wesley was mad at hops. He never accepted the change, and he, you know, there weren't any copyright laws back then, but he never would have given permission for the change if he'd had a chance. We just ignored that when we sing Hark the Herald Angels Sing. But Hark the Herald Angels Sing is one of those things we sort of shift into gear. We get in a rut and we just sing it. We know it. But if we stop long enough to listen very closely to Hark the Herald Angels Sing, it turns out it's an Easter hymn. Risen with healing in his wings. Charles Wesley was writing about the resurrection. And it's only because of that first stanza that it lopped over into the Christmas. And then when it was put to a new tune, then we do that refrain, glory to the newborn King. But that's an Easter hymn. It's an Easter hymn, and it's a reminder always that Christmas itself points to Jesus, not the newborn baby necessarily, but Jesus, the resurrected Lord in our lives. And if we stop listening, if we aren't paying attention, we may miss the voice of God talking to us at Christmas. Sometimes when we listen to our elders talk, they'll tell us the stories about the Christmases a long time ago. They may tell us stories about Christmas 30 years ago and 40 years ago and 50 years ago. And they're fascinating stories. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I get a little impatient with the detail. Some of our elders begin to get long-winded. The older they get, the longer they go. And if I get in a hurry, and if I don't listen and pay really close attention to what the elders are telling me about the Christmases a long time ago, I may miss the voice of God, because what they're really talking about is how they miss something from those Christmases. What they really may be talking about is the fact that they're lonely. And if I'm not listening carefully, I may miss the voice of God talking to me through the elders. When we listen to our youth will tell you how exciting it is to be out of school right now. Thank you very much. But if you listen very long, they'll also then begin to talk about what's happening in school and what happens to them in school and what they hope is going to come from that and what they think the future might be for themselves. And what they're doing is they're projecting our future, friends. When they say, this is what we hope for, that better be what we're hoping for too. Because they're the ones who are going to paint that future. And if you and I don't listen to our teens when they're talking to us, when we don't listen, we may very easily miss the voice of God, giving us a prophetic word about what the future can be. Those of us who were lucky enough to be here on Wednesday night got to hear the children. We also got to hear the youth orchestra, and they were awesome, no doubt. And we got to hear the children. We got to hear the children ring their chimes and ring their bells and then sing to us about Christmas. And if anybody understands about singing about Christmas, surely it's the children, right? Now, that doesn't mean that sometimes they forget the words or they speed up or they have an inside joke that those of us who are in the audience don't understand. But we have to listen hard